Tropical storm watches are issued for the Texas coastline. Good evening, I'm Mike Naso with this Sunday night update on the tropics. We do have a developing system in the western Gulf of Mexico that is forecast to hit the United States Gulf Coast as a hurricane by the middle of this week. Now, this system does not have a low-level center yet, so it doesn't have a name yet, but it has tropical storm force winds, and it should become a tropical storm overnight Sunday into tomorrow morning on Monday, and then strengthened more thereafter. This is the system here that I'm speaking of in the western Gulf of Mexico. A lot of moisture with it, a lot of gusty winds, a lot to talk about with this system. Now, it's a potential tropical cyclone because it doesn't have a center yet, but it's close enough to where we needed tropical storm watches, therefore advisories are being issued on potential tropical cyclone 6. If and when this gets a name, because it's already past tropical storm force with 50-mile-an-hour winds, it will be named Francine. Now, the system is moving north-northwest at 5, and the center, whatever center there is estimated to be around 21.9 north, 94.7 west, and this motion to the north-northwest should continue for the next day or so as it moves around this little ridge of high pressure here, mid-level ridge, off to the northeast. However, as a trough moves through, it should accelerate and move north, then north-northeast and northeast in the general direction, potentially, of the Louisiana coastline, but anybody from the mid-Texas coast, even past Louisiana to the east, should be keeping a close watch on this system because strengthening is in the forecast, and the National Hurricane Center has it striking the Gulf Coast of Louisiana as a Category 1 hurricane Wednesday evening. And again, right now the forecast is for an 80-mile-an-hour hurricane. That's not too far off from where Debbie was when it struck the Florida Big Bend earlier this year, and Beryl when Beryl hit the mid-Texas coast. So again, a solid hurricane expected for the Gulf Coast. After that, the system should accelerate to the northeast and dissipate, but bring with it gusty winds and heavy rainfall. We do have tropical storm watches in effect from Barra del Tordo, Mexico. By the way, I looked it up. Barra del Tordo is Spanish for thrush bar. I don't know. And then that goes all the way up to Port Mansfield into the Texas coast there past the Rio Grande. So again, tropical storm watch with the expectation that you could potentially get into these tropical storm force winds as the system moves to the northwest, very close to the Texas coast, before hooking to the right. Again, whether or not it moves closer to the coast is dependent on where exactly that circulation center forms. Right now, it looks like it's somewhere in this general location. The winds are really being accelerated here on the western side because they're being enhanced by the Sierra Madre Mountains. So again, that's some fascinating stuff there. There's the loop of the system, and again, it does look like a trough. It doesn't really look like a tropical storm yet, but it's close. The system should get in more consolidated form throughout Monday and then start to strengthen. The waters are very, very warm, and the upper level wind shear, this is a little scary here. Notice this little anticyclone. Whenever you have a tropical cyclone, low pressure in the Atlantic basin, it spins counterclockwise, right? Like a hurricane. So the opposite of that is the anticyclone spins clockwise, and that's high pressure aloft, and that vents the system. So we're a little concerned that as it interacts with the trough, the shortwave trough that's going to pick it up, it could strengthen. It could tighten up, kind of like an ice skater pulling her arms in as she spins on the ice. So again, we'll watch it. Right now, not extremely favorable, but it's getting better. The computer models, these are the European ensembles. We'll watch as the new models come out overnight into Monday morning, but right now, they show it becoming a strong tropical storm or a hurricane and striking most of them right into Louisiana. But again, it could be Cameron, Louisiana. It could be Grand Isle. We don't know. And the GFS models are not that different. They show it right into the Louisiana coastline, a little to the west of where the European is. But again, I've seen systems like this before that have dragged along. So if it's going to be pulled northeast, be on the lookout if you're further east, even though you're not in the cone and you're not under any watches or warnings and you're not even in a lot of the models, just in case. Because this system could be one that affects this area of the Gulf Coast and then all the way back towards areas further to the east. Now, this is the name list for this year. There are 6 name lists in the Atlantic since 1979. All 6 of them were created with 21 names from the letter A to the letter W, and excluding a couple of the harder letters to come up with names. And this name list was first used back in 1982. And we've gone through a couple of F names. Florence was Hurricane Florence, slammed into the Carolinas in 2018. They retired the name and replaced it with Francine, which bothered me a bit because I've tracked Hurricane Fran in 1996, which was retired, and Hurricane Francis in 2004, which was retired. To me, Fran and Francis, a little too close to Francine. You know, they could have gone with something different. They could have gone with an F name for a female that hasn't been used before, retired. Faith, Fern, Felicity. But anyway, Francine is the next name, so this should be Francine. And believe it or not, it reminds me a little bit of another storm with a similar name. Before Hurricane Francis of 2004, I was tracking in 1998, we had a tropical storm Francis, which was an elongated, very wet system that caused $500 million damage in Texas and western Louisiana as it moved there very near the Gulf Coast. And then we had another storm that year, Hurricane Earl, in early September 1998, and that hit the Florida Panhandle. It was a Category 2. It made landfall as a tropical storm, I believe, but it really caused a lot of problems with flooding. But that, too, was elongated and kind of, it took a track where it kind of dragged along the Gulf Coast. And that's why I'm curious if this system does something similar. Looks like rainfall would be the main threat. As this drags on in, it should drop copious amounts of rain along the Gulf Coast. However, hopefully it's moving quickly enough to where there's no prolonged flood threat. But still, right now, a slight risk of flooding anywhere from Brownsville all the way to the Florida Panhandle, up to Memphis, Little Rock, including Jackson, Lake Charles, Houston, and Mobile. You guys are in that risk as well. Right now, the radar out of Brownsville shows a lot of heavy rainfall offshore. Again, it's going to be wet and gusty along areas of the North Mexico and South Texas coast as the system develops and pools towards the north. So the key messages from the National Hurricane Center: number 1, the system is forecast to become a tropical storm tomorrow, Monday, if you're watching it already after midnight today. As it moves near the western Gulf of Mexico coast, we have those tropical storm watches in effect. Number 2, the system is forecast to become a hurricane before it reaches the Gulf Coast by the middle of the week. While it is too soon to pinpoint the exact location and magnitude of the impacts, no doubt the potential for life-threatening storm surge and damaging winds are increasing for portions of the Louisiana and upper Texas coast through Tuesday night, beginning Tuesday night, and then beyond that. Hurricane and storm surge watches will likely be issued for a portion of the area later today on Monday, and residents should ensure they have their hurricane plan in place. And we could see potentially heavy rainfall and flash flooding from the coast of northeast Mexico all the way into Texas and Louisiana through Thursday. Again, like I said, very wet weather. Now we have other systems of note, those 2 tropical waves, one with a 50% chance over the next few days, one with a 70% chance. Both are in that really weird intertropical convergence zone we've had in the last month. They should mill around and eventually move west-northwest. Hopefully, they won't get close to land, but it's just too soon to tell. Right now, the satellite, they're not looking that great. But again, over time, they could develop another wave about to leave Africa. So be on alert because the hurricane season is nearing its peak. So that will do it right now. This is the system we're going to be watching over the next day, 2 days, 3 days. It should become a tropical storm named Francine, and then a hurricane as it heads towards the Gulf Coast. We will continue to watch it and update you. I'm Mike Nasa with the latest on the tropics, and I will talk to you next time with more on our system in the Gulf.